you the contract to deliver him to me alive.
Where do I find him?
He's to be moved across the border and taken to an army barracks at Zimbabwe.
And you want me to intercept him and deliver him to you?
Correct.
Why would you be looking for me?
With Tiger, age 42, sir. 12 years in the Black Watch, rank of sergeant.
Blake, Jesse, Donaldson, sir.
Whitty, Arthur, sir, age 43, medical orderly.
The countdown has started for the Wild Geese, 50 steel-hard mercenaries. They train like dogs. They fly like birds. They fight like jackals.
Now, Lombardy's being delivered tomorrow night.
The Wild Geese. Fighting is their business. Killing is their trade. Their mission, to save the life of the president of a new African nation.
Sit still, right where you are, don't move.
Now in paperback from Corgi Books.
Hello. I had that book, but the one with the cover of the actors on the front. Well, this is a late to the schedule stream. I only put this up earlier today, and of course I'm fresh off of doing Industry Interview 79. I've just been on the phone to Los Angeles with another actor who's going to come on. I don't want to say anything until we've got dates and things booked. But I have got two more people from the world of Hollywood booked already. I've got one of the lead actors from Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Sin, and Rage War, The Challenges of Excalibrate. Jeffrey Bryan's coming on next week. I just need to check the dates, but yeah, he's coming on, and more people besides. Pretty busy schedule coming up, guys. So there's 8 people watching. We're going to be talking about The Wild Geese, and the good news is this film currently is available on Amazon completely for free. So if you're interested in seeing it, do check it out. It's available on Amazon. There are also 3 versions of it on YouTube, and I'll probably be going to one of them shortly. I'm not going to have this originally, as kind of the poster for this was a watch party. Now I have got the film paused on my telly right there, so in fact if I press play right now and I pump the volume up, you'll be able to hear the theme tune playing like so. The opening title sequence is actually something we do need to talk about. That's the lovely voice of Joan Armatrading. I also have the soundtrack to The Wild Geese on vinyl in a box behind me. If I was better prepared, I'd have it in my hand. I might dig it out in just a second. I've just been writing about this movie in my new book, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do a stream about it. There are about 4 films in my life that have had a massive influence on me, that have inspired me to find out more about things in the movie. They've inspired me to do certain things in my life. They've taught me certain things, and those films that have had a massive influence, one of them was Star Wars. Another one was A Bridge Too Far, and another one is The Wild Geese. There are more. In fact, my book is about 100 films that have had an influence on me. I see some comments in the chat. Do put your comments in the chat. We're at that luxury time where I can probably put all of them on the screen. So good to see you again, Wormy Spoon. So if you're watching, comment in the chat, and I'll talk to you in just a second. There are a whole host of reasons why I want to talk to people about this movie. There are things about it which are dated. There are things about it which are not great today. But there are things about it, key things, important things, meaty things about it, which still hold water, which are still relevant. And it is, as a script, it's a fantastic piece of writing. You could do this script and remake it, let's say, in Japan. I'm not suggesting this as a course of action, by the way. I'm just citing why it would work. And you could do it about a group of mercenaries from Japan going to rescue a family in Taiwan when during the Chinese takeover of Taiwan, which hasn't happened yet, but may well happen in the not too distant future. So let's say that's the fictional setting, because The Wild Geese is a fictional movie against the background of the Congo, which was happening at the time, the mercenaries in the Congo, loosely based on a true story there. But you could take this same script and let's say you could put it in Taiwan, and it would absolutely work because the characters and the script and the story are so strong. They're so good. The themes of friendship, loyalty, all of that stuff is really good. I'm going to actually play the film in the background while I'm talking, but I've got the soundtrack to this on CD as well as vinyl. I'm going to turn this right down because otherwise we're going to get a copyright flag situation, aren't we? I've met about 5 of the cast of this film, including Richard Harris. And I first saw this movie when it was premiered on British television in 1978. And I talk about that in my new book that's dropping. I mean, I know I'm plugging my book a bit, but it is my channel, and I do plug a lot of other people on my channel. So forgive me if I just plug my book for a second. I've got a book coming out, which is basically about 100 films that I've seen that have influenced my life or impacted me in some way. And if I show you the section that covers films that I personally saw between 77 and 79, this is the vellum template for the book. I did a little stream about this the other day. And we scroll through here, there's a whole section, and we see there's Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Came out in 71, but I didn't see it until 1977 on New Year's Day. That was the UK premiere. Kelly's Heroes was also premiered on television in the UK, 1977. Jaws, I also saw in 77 at the cinema on re-release. There's the cinema I saw it at. Mysterious Island, I saw for the first time in 77. Spy Who Loved Me gets a lot of pages. That's another big influence. Star Wars. And if we keep scrolling down, we had the double bill there. Gumball Rally, Warlords of Atlantis, Wild Geese. Here's the Wild Geese. There's always a quote from the movie in each section of the book. This is from the penultimate scene in the film. And you can see it was screened on ITV either side of the news, I watched it with my parents because this bit's always who I saw it with, on the 17th of September 1978. Now, I would not have been very old at that time. My bedtime would have been 9 o'clock. And it was from 9 until 10. Then News at 10 came on. News at 10 kind of wrapped up around 10:30. And then they showed the rest of the movie. And the movie would have finished at about 11:30 because it's about a 2-hour long film. And I had to beg my parents to stay up to watch the second part of the film after News at 10. Anybody in the UK who saw the film the first time it screened on British television, and that was a cut version, it was heavily edited, will know what I'm talking about. And yeah, we saw the very heavily edited, well, not heavily edited, it had about 5 scenes that had the violence severely trimmed down. But anyway, let's get this back up so I can put the images back up for you. So I'm going to talk through what makes the movie great, what hasn't aged. I am going to address the criticisms, and it's not a perfect film. You know, it was, it's got some things that have suffered with age, absolutely. especially unfortunately, the first 25 minutes, I would say, of the film. And we'll talk about the sort of the stark differences between some sections of it over others. But the basic story, if people don't know it, is Alan Faulkner is a mercenary. He is hired by a banker, Edward Matheson, to basically go into the country of Zambala, where he's going to rescue its leader, who is being held hostage. Its old leader, Julius Limbani. It's been discovered that he's alive. Everybody thought he was dead. He's kind of being held by General Zandova, who is the guy who's done a coup in the country and taken it over. And this is all to do with mining rights. And the banker basically knows that if Limbani is back in power, they should be able to strike a deal with Limbani and get the rights to the mining diamonds and copper. I think it's copper. So the mercenaries are charged with going in, finding him, rescuing him, bringing him back. And that's what happens. But they're betrayed because Edward Matheson goes behind their back. He does a deal with General Zandova. He gets the copper rights. He doesn't need Limbani, so instead of letting the men come back out, he basically orders the plane to leave them behind. So the plane that's supposed to pick them up doesn't do that, and now they have to fight their way out. Among their number is Rafer Janders, who wasn't even supposed to go on the mission originally, and he has a 10-year-old son. He's a single dad, and Alan Faulkner's been made godfather of that child in case Rafer doesn't come back. Its core themes are about loyalty and friendship, particularly the friendship between Alan and Rafer Janders. But there is also, this film was made at the time of apartheid. It was shot in 1977 in South Africa predominantly. The interiors were done, I think, in Elstree, if I remember rightly. It might have been Pinewood, but I think it was Elstree Studios. And the interiors for the film that were not filmed on location, for the most part, looked pretty terrible. Very flat lighting, very obviously kind of sets in a studio environment, and lighting wasn't as great as it was back there. Twickenham Film Studios, is where they did the interiors. Twickenham. And some of the London exteriors were, in fact, all of the London exteriors were shot in the Twickenham area, at Twickenham Boys' School. But once the film gets to Africa, it's in a different league. And but what's really great about this movie is the setup. The setup for the film is extremely strong. It's very well done. And you know why it's very well done? And that's because it's written by Reginald Rose. Reginald Rose is the same man who wrote 12 Angry Men, which is one of the best plays and films ever written. So it's an absolutely fantastic piece of writing. You're introduced to all of the characters very quickly. You're introduced to the mission stakes very quickly. You know who's worked with who before. So it's an ensemble piece with Richard Harris and Richard Burton as the two leads, Roger Moore and Hardy Kruger as the supporting leads, and then a whole plethora of British character actors. The other core element at the soul of this movie are the two African characters, and I want to talk about them. Oh, by the way, I've got this poster. That's the original UK cinema quad. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Yeah, you can actually get these cards. Someone's made a whole load of cards for the Wild Geese. I think you can buy them on eBay, if I remember rightly. There's the lovely Jack Watson, who plays Sandy, who's the sergeant major who's in charge of training the men. That is Glyn Baker, who is Stanley Baxter's son. Stanley Baxter, many people will remember from Zulu. Glyn Baker also filmed, he also shot Star Wars Return of the Jedi a few years after this. So there's some shots on location. Right, we've got John Canny in the background there. And then we have Winston Nashonda, who's also in the film. So I want to get a picture of them if I can find it. As Hardy Kruger. Got some great stills on here, actually. Couldn't have done them better myself. Julius Limbani, who is played by Winston Nashonda, who sadly passed away a few years ago. He and John Carney had worked together before. Both actors of South African origin. And I fortunately was lucky enough to meet them both at the bar at the National Theatre when they did a play called The Island, which is also a sort of, they did a play called The Island and they did another play called John Zimbar's Way is Dead or something like that. I forget the exact title, which is a kind of satirical look about a person trying to get documents in order to register to vote and how ridiculous that all was in South Africa under apartheid for a black man to be able to do that. These are two incredibly gifted actors who have a background in stage performing. John Carney is still performing now and is based in London. I've actually had correspondence with him, reminding him I met him at the bar of the National. There he is on the far right. And the relationship between the men and Julius Simbani, who initially for them is just a paycheck, is really what's at the core of the film, because gradually that relationship between them changes and they come to respect him. And in fact, he's more intelligent than all of them put together. And they realize why the world needs people like him. They realize that these are the kind of leaders who are worth saving. That's kind of a core message in the movie, really. So Alan Faulkner, who's played by Richard Burton here with the Uzi machine gun, and the film was sponsored by Uzi, incidentally. Not many people know that. That's why there are so many Uzi machine guns in the film. They kicked a bit of money in, and they gave a whole load of Uzis to the production. Yeah, for Alan Faulkner, it's just a paycheck initially, but he does know that Rayford Janders cares about Julius Zimbani. Rayford Janders, his friend, is an idealist, or was, until he became a bit jaded. So the first 25 minutes are spent kind of setting all this up, introducing you to the characters. Roger Moore has been working for a low-level gangster, or the son of quite a high-level gangster, smuggling drugs around, and he didn't realize he was actually smuggling drugs. A girl under his watch overdosed. Roger Moore was actually notoriously anti-drugs in real life. Alan Ladd, who plays Sonny in the first film, the first scene with Roger Moore, is actually the son of he's the son of the guy in charge of Ladd Productions that made the Police Academy films, certainly made the first one. You got Roger Moore wearing my dad's flat cap in there. So Lark Bark, who is in the chat, such a great film. It's so iconic. They don't make films like this anymore. I would agree. We haven't had a British action picture like this in a long time. And that's a shame, because it's a really, really good action picture. I did a stream about Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. Just saying that title out loud makes me shiver. And about the geography of action in a battle sequence. And the geography of the action is so well choreographed in the final sequence of the Wild Geese. I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here, but you know where everybody is, what's at stake, and how it all fits. And it all makes sense. And when people get killed in that battle scene, you feel it. You feel it because you've come to learn the characters. You've come to care about them. And there are 100 mercenaries. No, 50. Sorry, there are 50 mercenaries going on this mission. You probably get to know about 10 of them really well. You kind of know some of the faces of the others, played by character actors like Percy Hobart, and so on. But even the extras, when they're getting shot and they're dying, you care about them as well, because you care about the unit as a whole. And that's a skill of a great writer, to make you do that, to get you that invested in so many characters in such a short space of time, is the skill of a great writer. By the time we get to the mission, we've got Rayford Janders, who really cares about his son. We've got Sean Finn, who we know is, a kind of cheeky chappy, but he's got people that care about him back in the UK. We know that he's loyal. We know that he'll go to bat for Alan Faulkner. We know that Alan Faulkner really cares about his men. We know that Whitty, the medic, who's very obviously gay, and it was really rare to have a gay character like this in a film at this time, by the way. Very, very rare. And Kenneth Griffiths, who was a homosexual all his life, when he was asked to play the part and read the script, famously said, when they asked, do you mind playing a homosexual character? Oh, well, some of my best friends are homosexuals. Even though the character is very over the top and camp, you got to remember, this is in 1977. This was filmed, released in 1978. He got to carry a machine gun and he got to kill people in the film. That just didn't happen in other films at that time. I can't think of one other movie where a character got to do that, who was gay, who was still a good person at this time. If you can, please put a comment in the chat. Inside Man is here. Do you have time to pop on, mate? Because if you do, please come on. In fact, I'm going to send you the link anyway, because I know I might be able to tempt you. So Inside Man is in the chat. Incidentally, I have said to YouTubers earlier, if you are a fan of this movie and you want to come on and talk about it with me, pop on, because I'd love to have you come on. So any other YouTubers out there, just come on. And I was hoping he would have noticed. So what is this? I'll be doing my. This is. Let me put this in the thing. For Wild Geese. Soon's live now. Yeah. By the time I've typed this, Inside Man will be on, I reckon. Oh no. Okay. Boom. So yeah. So this film did a lot of things that. Oh, was it finished? Did I? Oh my God! I didn't accidentally end it, did I? No. Oh, I'm still live. Okay, good. That's the old stream. Okay, good. Let's get rid of that. Yeah. So I got confused then. I did a stream before this, and that window was still open. I thought I'd accidentally pressed the wrong button. So this film did quite a lot of things that a lot of films didn't do at this time, which is that it got you invested in a lot of characters who were on the side of the goodies, and then it would kill a lot of them. So by the time you got to the last 20 minutes of this movie, you didn't know who was going to live and who was going to die. You had no idea, in fact. And I remember watching this with my parents and being absolutely horrified when certain characters started dying. I'd be like to my dad, is he dead? And which he does have a great death scene. That death scene was heavily edited when it was first shown on British television. It was heavily edited. So shall we have a quick look at this? So the men arrive in Africa to be trained by Sandy. Some of them know him before, some of them don't. And there have been nods to the initial training scene. My God, in so many films. Let's have a quick look at that. I think I've got a clip of it here.
First, Roger.
So Sandy is the man who trains the men. He's even offered the opportunity to get his paycheck, but not to go because Alan Faulkner feels he owes it to him. He's his oldest friend. You can tell they've been on many missions, and this is you're taught these lessons in just a couple of lines of dialogue. We know that Alan and Rafer have been on many missions before because Rafer refuses to go because of his son. So Alan gets a map out and says, "Tell me how I get in and out of this place then." Next scene, I've got Rafer Janders. We know that Rafer's on board. We don't need a big scene where all we need is that line. It's very economical what Reginald Rose does with this script. Very economical. He just says the line, "I've got Rafer Janders," after "how do I get in and out of this place." It's done like that. That's all we need. So I don't know where the inside man is, but maybe he's gone to bed. But I thought he was going to pop on. He was literally in the chat just now. So let me drop him a text as well in case he hasn't seen it. So talking about the opening sequence for this movie, the title sequence, which is incredibly well done. Well, the guy who did the title sequence was Maurice Binder. Now, if that name sounds familiar, it should, because Maurice Binder is the guy who did the title sequences for many of the James Bond films. And he was extremely popular at the time. He could command a pretty good fee to do a movie or a television show. And yeah, he was brought on to do the link for this. He also did another film that was shot under apartheid called Gold, which also stars Roger Moore, which I'm sure a lot of people will have seen. And his title sequences all look pretty similar, but what's great about this one is he got several pieces of footage from all the stuff that was unfolding in the Congo, the transition of power from Belgium, the Belgian king, to the Congolese themselves and so forth. And there is actually footage of a guy who was rescued and brought out of the Congo by a team of mercenaries in a Dakota, on which the basis for the film began. That was the story that inspired it, in case anybody doesn't know about that. Let me just type. I had a couple of people that said they wanted to come on. Quite happy to talk about the Wild Geese on my own for 2 hours, no problem. I'm just making sure people have got a link. There we go. So so let's talk about the film's issues. Okay, the film does have some issues. The scenes with Paul Spurrier, who plays Emile, who's basically he's a product of a private education, so he speaks incredibly posh. Those scenes are a little bit cringe. The other scenes that are another scene that is definitely cringe is the scene that's set at the 1970s disco. Oh dear, which is in Sonny's house, or Sonny's apartment in London. It's supposed to be kind of, swinging, groovy London, but it's dreadfully dated now. The music in that sequence is dreadfully dated. The interiors at Matheson's house, the lighting is all quite sort of naff and flat. It does feel very much like a set. The same with the scenes like set in a hotel corridor and so on at the beginning of the film. Those scenes are all a little bit they're flatly lit and so on. The directing and the acting is consistent throughout. The film is directed by Andrew McLachlan, or Andrew V. McLachlan, who up to this point was largely known for doing westerns. He was predominantly a Western director. That was what he did. So if you hadn't seen him, and you didn't know who he was, but at the time he was, they needed somebody, because there's a lot of action in the film. They needed a director who could handle action, and Euan Lloyd had a relationship with Andrew, and Andrew is this really tall, like 6 foot by 6 foot guy, super tall. And if you go on my industry interview with Timothy Bentic had a supporting role in the film, the Roger Moore vehicle, if you like, North Sea Hijack. North Sea Hijack is also directed by Andrew V. McLachlan, and North Sea Hijack it's not an amazing film. It's an okay movie, but I really like it. And basically, it's one of those films, as the director called it, a meat and potatoes picture. And Tim Bentic, on the industry interview, you'll find it under the industry interviews playlist. He basically was auditioning, and Andrew McLachlan stood on his shoes and looked him up and down and went, "Okay, kid, you'll do." And that was basically his audition. I think there might have been a bit more to it than that, but that was basically his audition. And it was quite entertaining. So it might be that you'll like North Sea Hijack if you haven't seen it. Again, the whole film is on YouTube. So some of the early scenes in the film are not as good as they could be, but the action, there's an action sequence when the gangsters come to try and kill Sean Finn, but Edward Matheson has the contract on Finn lifted because he controls a number of newspapers, and he's able to exert power and gets the contract killed off at the last moment. So that's what happens. And then pretty soon after that, we kind of move to a recruitment scene where they're recruiting people. Then they have to pitch their plan to Matheson's banker, the guy who is financing the operation, he's only in the one scene, played by a well-known British character actor. Some people may remember him from the Barrett adverts. I met him under rather auspicious, at a rather auspicious occasion. Not an occasion. I held open the door for him when he got out of a taxi, and that was at the funeral of British actor Michael Williams. So there wasn't really time to chat about the Wild Geese, but that was Patrick Allen, the actor Patrick Allen, who does he plays the character of Rushton in the briefing sequence. You might recognize some of these landmarks in the background. That's because about 5 other films have all been shot in this area. Most of them were shot in this sort of time period. There's Hardy Kruger with his crossbow. This is in London. Frank Finlay turns up in a supporting role. He's an actor that I really, really, really like. Roger Moore's eyebrows going full pelt in that scene. I want to say something about Roger Moore, actually, because Roger Moore will tell you, and I met him about a year before he passed away. I met him, and he would be the first person to tell you that he was extremely lucky to get where he got. He happened to be a good-looking lad, and he always thought his acting talent was pretty minimal. I think he's underselling himself when he does that. I think he was slightly typecast at playing sort of heroic pretty boys, and of course he did a pretty good job of playing James Bond. But if you watch him in The Man Who Haunted Himself, which is another picture from the 1970s, he's extremely good in that. And to just say that he's playing a variation of James Bond in this film, I think is doing him a disservice, because the character of Sean Finn, sure, he's a ladies' man, but that aside, that's the only thing he's got in common with Bond. And I think Moore is perfectly fine in this. So I met Roger Moore. I also met Richard Harris. So I'll tell you the story. I might as well tell you these stories as I remember them. Meat and potatoes movies are sorely lacking these days. They need to come back. Good to have you on, Adrian. Adrian, if you want to pop on and talk to me about your thoughts on this film, Adrian's been on the channel before. Let me know, mate, and I'll send you the link via Facebook. How I met Richard Harris was, as you probably know if you've watched anything on my channel before, you'll know that I'm very good friends with actor Jason Fleming, and Jason and I were in a pub next to the Savoy Hotel. The Savoy Hotel has a pub called the Savoy, and it's attached to the Savoy Theatre, which is also attached to the hotel, and Jason was doing a play there. And basically, this was probably about 2001, I think. My memory is a bit vague as to exactly when this took place. But Richard Harris was sitting at a table with about 4 other people. And I was at the bar having a drink with Jason. We were on bar stools. And I looked over to my left and I went, "See that geezer over there, Jace? He looks just like Richard Harris." And Jace goes, "That is Richard Harris. He's in here most nights because he lives at the Savoy. When he's in London, he lives at the Savoy. He's got a room there permanently." And I was like, "Really?" I said, yeah. And I think Harris did a really good job of making that a justifiable taxable expense, like it was like, because he was renting, he was like it was a business address or something. Anyway, I'm sure he did all right. And I looked over again and I went, "Fuck me, it is Richard Harris. I've got to go over." And now a prelude to this story is about a year earlier, I'd hired out a cinema to show the Wild Geese as a surprise film for my birthday. No one knew what film we were going to watch who came. I hired out the Curzon in Soho, one of their screens with about 100 seats in it. About 70 people came. And it was at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I paid not a huge sum of money. Everybody kicked in a £5. Instead of buying me a drink for my birthday, everybody kicked in a £5. And we basically, this is the scene that's playing on my telly right now. We basically watched the Wild Geese on a big screen, and it was video projected off of a VHS copy that was quite grainy, but that didn't matter actually. And I said to Richard Harris, I said, "Mr. Harris, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to tell you that I loved you in the Wild Geese, and I actually hired a cinema out for my birthday last year so I could watch it on the big screen with all my friends. I have to say, it was amazing on the big screen. I just wanted to tell you that." And he went, "Thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say." And then I said to him, "I'd offer to buy you a drink, but I can see you've already got one, so I won't interrupt your evening any further." And I stepped away, and that was the only time I ever met or spoke to Richard Harris, and I think he passed away about a year later. The inside man was briefly in the green room, and he's disappeared. Maybe his wife told him off and said he should go to bed. But I'll see. Maybe he's coming back. So he's always having problems with his connection. Anyway, so this is the planning phase of the operation. You can see there's an actual model of the barracks and of the airport, which they've got to take as part of the operation. This is Patrick Allen, who plays Rushton. And the big crux in this scene is that they find that the operation has been moved up 6 weeks. Now, the only reason that Richard Harris agrees, or Ray Fajanders agrees to do the mission, is as long as it doesn't interrupt his skiing holiday that he's got planned with his son. What happens in this scene is because the operation gets moved up, unfortunately, that means that his holiday isn't going to happen until after they get back. So he has to go and tell his son that he's not going to spend Christmas with him. Now, that's actually a really quite powerful scene, because you can see how crestfallen Rayford Janders is in that scene. Richard Harris just conveying it with a look, and then Alan, Richard Burton, straight after is, listen, Rayford, I had no idea. No, it's fine. And he just dismisses it really quickly and says, look, I need to talk to you about some supplies and things we're going to need to buy. It's very, very well done, but it puts a huge emotional stake on the mission, on the operation, because now we know that Rayford Janders, the holiday he planned to have with his son, that would have been great for him to do with his son before he went on the mission, just in case anything went wrong. Now that's going to happen afterwards. That's a huge shift in stakes, in the geography of the stakes for that. So, yes, that is a huge kipper tie, isn't it? They were very popular in the 70s. Big kipper tie. We then move on to like the recruitment section, and we've got this kind of montage of interviews. This is this scene here. It's playing on my TV right now, where Tosh comes in. Donaldson, sir. And he, 3 tours with you, rank a sergeant, sir. All this. How are things treating you, Tosh? Not so good, sir. I'm a plumber now. It's not my line. I know the script of this absolutely backwards. Now, the actor that plays Tosh, Euan Lloyd, was a real soldier and did serve in Africa. And the inside man's here.
Good evening.
Oh, mate. Yeah, I only decided I was doing Wild Geese earlier today. So,
yeah, and what a movie to do
about it, but I don't think you saw it.
What a movie to do, eh? What a film to do.
Well, the thing is, it's actually on, it's on Amazon at the moment. Good to see you, Marlene. Just popped in for a story and got more than I hoped for. Oh, that gentle voice. That obviously means your voice, Inside Man. Just off the bed, but now I'll give you a listen instead of an audio book. That's very kind. So, Evening Inside Guy. There you go. You should change your name to Inside Guy. And with the change of one letter, that could be even more entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah. Patrick Allen is a legend for me. Guest role of UFO. Yeah, on the TV series UFO.
Mm.
So I've actually got the movie playing on my telly to my left with the sound turned right down. If I turn it up right now, they're on the scene with, how old are you? And he goes, what year were you born? And he can't remember. Yeah. How old are you really? Yeah. So it's the recruitment montage scene. So this film was going to be remade, and I believe he's still got the rights to it, by Guy Ritchie, mate. What do you think about that?
Oh my goodness me. God help us, is all I can say.
I mean, like, I have to say, when I saw the Man from U.N.C.L.E. movie, I was massively disappointed.
Yeah.
In that film. I do like some of Guy Ritchie's work, but I was really looking forward to Man from U.N.C.L.E. And I thought, haven't they paid for the Lalo Schifrin theme tune? Surely they're going to do a modern version of that with the dun 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 dun. I mean, that was kind of iconic.
Yeah.
I thought, why is this not in here? What's going on?
It's like you're absolutely right. I mean, it's like Superman without the Superman music, or Mission Impossible without the Mission Impossible theme.
Yeah.
It's a great piece of music, but I mean, I would be very, very disappointed if Guy Ritchie did start to flex his ego once again and make this. I'd be absolutely devastated.
Well, I don't think I told you this story, and it's in my new book, but I actually got Euan Lloyd on the phone once. In fact, he called me because I wrote to him. This was in the early 2000s when I heard that they were going to do a Wild Geese 3 and they were going to shoot it in Africa.
Right.
And I thought, I want to write that. and I wrote a pitch out for it.
Yeah.
And I didn't send in the pitch. I just said, look, I don't know if you've got a writer yet, but I want to do it. I know the characters. I know the story. I think Reginald Rose was probably long deceased by this time.
Yeah.
This would have been like 2003 or something like that.
Mm.
And I get this phone call, right? And at the time, the actor who played McGrath, Stephen Walters,
Right.
this was not long after Band of Brothers had shot and he'd been staying at my house. He was always calling my landline and putting on silly voices and pretending to be someone else.
Mm.
So I was always like, when he was doing that, it got to the point where I was hanging up on him because he was doing it so often. So my landline rings, Lance Nilsson, please. And I was like, who's that? And he went, Lance Nilsson, please. And I went, is that Mr. Walters? And this guy just hung up the phone. And I was like, oh, what happened there? And then I'll add you in a second, Adrian. And then 2 days later, phone rings again. Lance Nilsson, please. And I said, I'm thinking, I don't think this is Stephen. So I went, yeah, this is Lance speaking. Euan Lloyd here. And I was like, really? And it was that you wrote to me, Euan Lloyd from Light Horse Productions here. You wrote to me, and I was like, yes. And he said, I understand you have a pitch for Wild Geese 3. And I said, yes. And he went, well, let's hear it then. So I was like, fuck, okay. So I pitched it over the phone, which was basically that Emil, Richard Harris's son, went to find the burial site of his dad in Zambala, which was now a non-war-torn country in a reasonable state of, you could go there as a tourist and whatnot.
Yeah.
And when he arrives and wants to find the burial site, which of course is next to impossible, but he goes to like Lembani's village, and there is a place where all the bodies were buried of all the men, and they were buried by the villagers after the Simbas left. And like, so one of the he meets a kid that a guy that was a kid at the time that the mercenaries came to the village. And anyway, to cut a long story short, he gets kidnapped. And Roger Moore's character, now of course an old guy, hears about this because the kidnappers put a video on, and it's him and Jesse, John Canny's character. They travel to Africa and they put together a team of mercenaries to go and rescue him. That was the pitch. And because I wanted to include the characters that survived. And part of the backstory was that Alan Faulkner had passed away, and so like before Sean goes to Africa, he goes to Alan Faulkner's grave and sort of does this little spiel about how this time I'm going to make sure everybody comes home, Let's get Adrian Sherlock on, all the way from down under. Hello, mate.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, mate.
Yeah, not bad. Adrian, meet the Inside Man. I don't know if you've been on together before. I've interviewed Adrian. He's got a whole load of books on Amazon about various British TV shows like The Tomorrow People. And
I saw the interview, actually. Absolutely amazing. Amazing. Well done, Adrian. Yeah, honestly, fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
I
usually just explain it by saying I have too much free time on my hands,
I know you're a big Roger Moore fan as well, and probably also, like me and Inside Man, you're a big fan of this movie.
Yeah, it's been such a long time. I probably saw it, my dad watching it, on TV when I was a teenager or something like that. And so I don't have the clearest memory of this movie, but of course the name is fixed in my brain as one of the, the sort of, as you mentioned,
well, the good news
hijack and all those sort of things. I remember
it's on YouTube. It's on YouTube, so you can see it for free. There are two versions of it on YouTube. Watch the more high res one. The other one is terrible, but it is also on Amazon currently for free. So if you've got an Amazon account, you can watch it on Amazon.
As you mentioned, it's you said it was sort of a meat and potatoes sort of action film.
No, I was talking about North Sea Hijack was a meat and
North Sea
potatoes
Hijack,
film.
right? Yeah.
The Wild Geese is so much more than that, way much more. It's got a lot more to it than that. I mean, one of the things that it was criticised for at the time was it was made under the banner of apartheid. It was shot mostly in South Africa, although in sort of Natal, the north, and it was heavily criticised for that. And John Canai and Winston Ntashonda, who were the two African actors in it, they were big names in Africa. They did a lot of plays, and then they came to England, and they stayed in England, and they did loads of stuff at the National. In fact, they wrote, I think, 2 or 3 plays together, and I met them. I saw them in a play they did together called The Island. I met them at the bar, and all I wanted to talk about was the Wild Geese, which they found very amusing. And I've written to John Canny, who's still alive. Winston, we lost a couple of years ago, and I've asked him to come on for an interview. I want to talk to him about his whole career, of course, not just the Wild Geese. But they were the people that actually, when they read the script, they thought, well, hang on a minute, this is a script about a group of over-the-hill white guys going to rescue an African leader who a couple of them really believe in, and gradually by the end of the story, they all believe in him, and several of them are prepared to die for him, and in fact do die for him. So you didn't really get many films about black and white guys working together. And one of the things I wrote in my new book, when I'm talking about this film at length, it gets a lot of pages, is bearing in mind I was probably like 6 or something when I saw this movie on TV. I'd never seen a black actor in a leading role before, let alone one firing a machine gun.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'd seen black actors playing pimps, and you know, when I was watching episodes of Starsky and Hutch, Huggy Bear was the first black actor I saw in a speaking role, I think. Huggy Bear.
I think for me it was probably Kano on Space 1999.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But
that was probably the first show I ever watched, you know what I mean, like consistently, because I was about 7 or 8 when it came on, you know.
But this was the first time I'd seen 2 black actors playing good guys in an action flick, and the whole film was about rescuing one of them. And I didn't know anything about apartheid. I didn't know anything about South Africa. I was a kid. I didn't really understand what the word racism meant. I didn't really understand that.
Well, I was actually living out as well. You know, I was actually a resident of South Africa at the time.
Yeah, you
This
were.
was
You
being
would have been
shot.
living there when this was shot, right?
Yeah, we were. I mean, my dad actually did know Mike Hoare, who was the military advisor on this.
Yeah.
And I remember when this was being shot, and it was we had this newspaper called the Rand Daily Mail, and there was a big. It was actually a colour newspaper way before we had colour newspapers in the UK. So it was a colour newspaper, and had all these big photographs, and it said, you know, the headlines were James Bond comes to South Africa. And of course, he'd already shot. I think he'd already shot a film called Gold, based on Wilbur Smith.
Gold
book.
filmed right around this time, but I wasn't
Yeah,
sure if it filmed before or after this. But
I think it was. I think it was before. Yeah, and there was, you know, there was constant coverage in the newspapers about the making of this film. Like I say, my dad, he knew Major Mike Hoare, or Mad Mike Hoare, the military advisor from his time in the military, and occasionally used to meet up with him in Durban. He came to our house, but I don't remember. I don't remember him coming to our house, but apparently he did. Yeah, it was a real big deal, you know. But also, what was a big deal about it was that back in the UK, there was an enormous amount of pushback against the making of the movie,
yeah, that's
because it
right.
was made in South Africa. You know, obviously apartheid, which was a horrendous thing to witness
Yeah, of
firsthand.
course.
I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how absolutely horrific it was. The only thing you could compare it to is Nazi Germany. That's what
Yeah,
it kind of
I
felt
knew you were
like.
going to
That's
say
what it
that,
was.
and the
Yeah,
way that the Jews were treated.
yeah. It
Yeah,
was. I mean, the black population had their own townships, which were literally ghettos, and you weren't allowed in there. Um, yeah, it was bad. It was bad. But I know that particularly Roger Moore was quite open in his criticism of a lot of the people who did the criticizing. You know, they didn't know. They didn't know how much the black population of South Africa actually helped out on this movie, and how
That's
much
right.
work it gave them.
Yeah,
You know.
because they played pretty much all the extras.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were all, they had quite, runners and things like that. All the drivers were all loco.
Yes, they were. Yeah, yeah.
It was only the production heads and their in sort of heads were really the the ADs and ACs and stuff like that were the people that came from the UK. But the size of the crew from the UK was relatively small, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I mean, obviously, you had people like John Glenn. I think was he second unit director?
I think he was I'll check on IMDb, but by this time he was known as a good sort of second unit action director.
Yeah, yeah.
And he did a lot of the. I mean, the action in this film is great. He edited the movie, John Glenn.
Right.
And yes, he was the second unit director. So that's a tremendous benefit if your second unit director is also your editor.
Wow.
And he knows what principal footage is being shot. He knows exactly how to make the action work around that. Tremendous advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. And he is a very, very good second unit director.
Yeah.
Very good.
And a director now, of course,
director,
in his own right.
Very good director, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, and the themes of the film, there are some things in it that haven't aged well, mainly in the first 25 minutes. The Yahoo scene with Emil, particularly embarrassing. The 1970s disco, which I might see if I can get a clip of in a second.
Yeah. Yes.
Also pretty embarrassing. I mean, just because you see a disco like that now, it probably looked fine at the time. Yeah. It ages the film. It dates the film.
Is that where Roger Moore's dancing kind of like this?
Well, Roger Moore isn't really dancing. He comes in looking like he's dressed entirely for a different. He looks like he's got a costume on. He actually looked like he's wearing my dad's clothes in that scene. So he looks like he's in a completely different movie when he comes in that sequence. But I mean, it's you briefly see the party, and the party just looks absurd. I mean, it looks ridiculous. I'm going to try and
that is one thing that really dates movies and shows is anything involving nightclubs and parties and dancing. It's really dated now.
Yeah, I mean, you can pretty much guarantee that. I'm not going to put the audio on this, so I just keep this muted for the moment. But generally, the UK interiors for the scene they're all a bit flat looking. The lighting isn't great, and so on. But I mean, that aside, as I've said before, you guys came on the stream, the script for this movie is written by Reginald Rose, and there's a reason that the script is good, and it's because he wrote it. One of the things that Rose is really good at doing, especially if you watch like 12 Angry Men, in 12 Angry Men, you get a sense of each juror quite quickly. That's the aggressive one. This is the one who's quite shy and quite quiet. This is the one who's quite studious and thoughtful. This is the one who's a loudmouth. This is the one who thinks he's a comedian. You've got 12 actors sitting around a table, and in a relatively short space of time, you've got a sense of who all of them are. By the end of Act 1, by the interval of 12 Angry Men, you know who all of them are. It's very clear to you who these 12 characters are. It's the same with the Wild Geese. You've got about half an hour of setup. By the time they go on the mission and they're in the plane, and I'm at that scene now where they're boarding the plane, we are 54 minutes in. So we're 54 minutes in when they board the plane to go to Africa. And in that time, we've learnt what's at stake for all of the characters. We've learnt about the background elements that are circling around them, like Sean is on the run from the London Mafia. We know that Edward Matheson is a banker. We know that he's connected to powerful people. We know that there are copyrights involved. We know what the mission is going to be. We know about the planning. We know about the weapons that they're going to use. We know that they're going to use cyanide gas to take out 200 men in a barracks. We know that there's 50 of them. We know that the plane's going to land. They're only going to be on the ground for a couple of hours. It's going to come back, pick them up. We know everything. So it's so well staged. Delta Echo Golf says, yeah, British character development. You don't get it. You don't get, and if you look at the dialogue, it's not that there's loads of dialogue. I mean, you've got 54 minutes to get invested in these people. That 54 minutes is really well spent, because after that, the film is action. We're in the mission right through to the end.
Yeah.
It's action. There's brief pauses between the action of people discussing what they're going to do next, but it's basically a series of action scenes from here on out. So
it sounds a little bit like maybe there was a small amount of influence from the Dirty Dozen. You know, that idea of slightly tainted heroes who are, you know, got a bit less virtuousness than the traditional.
Well, I mean, you know, a lot of these guys have got sort of families and jobs and things. It's just that they've all worked together in the past.
Mm-hmm.
We know that from you know, when he goes to recruit Sandy, just as the sergeant major, he just wants him to train the men. He doesn't want him to go on the mission. He insists on going in the mission. He's got a little scene about it. It's a great scene, you know. If you think you're going to be able to, if you want to see a real war, try and stop me. That's his line. So Reginald Rose is great at writing short lines that tell you loads about a character. I mean, you know, you can see this in The Acolyte, of course. Sorry, for anyone watching, that's what's known as British dry wit.
Yeah. It sounds like Predator, you know, without the alien, you know.
Well,
in terms of the
I think you need to watch it. You need to watch it,
into the
Adrian.
jungle.
You need to watch it.
Yeah.
You're not educated on this film. You need to watch it from start to finish.
I know the actors.
Television.
I know the actors, and I know various things about that era. So yeah, but yeah, it almost sounds like it's the sort of film that they would have been thinking of when they wrote Predator. You know, oh yeah, we need to have this bunch of you know, soldiers going off into the
you can
wilderness.
see the influence of the Wild Geese on a lot of movies now, for sure. This actor Euan Lloyd, who plays Tosh Donaldson in the film, what's interesting about him, and he only passed away in 2020, Christmas of 2020, was that he actually was a mercenary who worked with Mike Hoare. So Inside Man, who knows? You might have walked past him in the street when you were living in Africa.
It's certainly possible. I mean, like I say, I mean, my father knew him from his military days. Knew him quite well, and yeah, and he used to, like I said before, I mean, he used to visit him in Durban. He used to drive down to Durban to see him, and they'd meet up. I know he came into Joburg and Pretoria a few times. Met up with my dad and a couple of other friends, expats who were also ex-military people. So yeah, it's quite interesting. And the funny thing is, I mean, this was a particular favorite of my dad's. This is kind of mine and my dad's movie. You know, my lovely dad. You know, we used to sit and watch this all the time. This was kind of our movie. You know, because we got such a, you know, we still have a real sort of kind of homesickness for Africa. I mean, I do love Africa.
Yeah, same.
You know, so part of me still kind of yearns for Africa. You know, not just Southern Africa, but Africa as a whole. It's yeah. So yeah, this was ours, and I think there's a few things about this movie that I mean, I absolutely adore. For one, I think it's Roy Budd's amazing score and that beautiful Joan Armatrading title track.
Yeah.
Which is pretty special. But just look at these actors. I mean, look at this caliber of actor. These type of actors all in one movie. You know, all top billing actors in one film. You know,
Yeah, extreme. I mean, to assemble a car, if you were going to do a modern version of this, you'd have to do the same thing, which is that you would basically need to get 6 or 7 top British actors who are in their 40s, because when people watch it, they often laugh at the age of the characters. And I'm like, but that's the point. They're supposed to be these guys who are over the hill. That's why they're going. It's one last job, one last big paycheck, you know.
And Mike Hall was no spring chicken, you know.
No, he
and,
wasn't. He was,
and neither
he
was.
well into his 50s, wasn't he?
Yes, he was, and some of his men were also of a similar kind of age. So, you know, this is not that far removed from reality.
Yeah.
You know, these are men that just find civilian life with an awful lot of ex-military people. They find civilian life just almost unbearable. You know, this is why they do it. They just, it's in their blood. It's in them. They have to keep doing this kind of thing. They feel like they've been left behind if they don't do this kind of thing. You know, that's part of it. It is the money, obviously, but this is also part of it.
Yeah. So
it's a very true to life thing, that, isn't it? With people who've been in the military, is a lot of them really do feel like that the military situation is where they come alive. You know.
Yeah.
Where they belong.
Yeah.
They've become so well trained and acclimatized to it that they almost feel like, you know, this is my wheelhouse, not back home.
Precisely that. Yeah.
The production moved to Africa, and they basically took over a health spa while they were there, which was, you know, all the actors were there. There's a great picture of a load of the cast in that location, along with Roger Moore and Burton's partners at the time. So it was northern Transvaal, near Limpopo, where shooting took place, near the Messina border region, it was called.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah. I believe the old stone bridge that was used for this sequence, I believe, is still there. There's another massive bridge right next to it, but I think if you go on Google Earth, I think you can find it. Another movie that was shot around this time was Dark of the Sun. We talked about that on this channel before, actually. I'm quite keen to get the Blu-ray of that. William Blake popping in to say hi. Appreciate you. Thanks, man. So basically the mission, they get betrayed, and that's a really incredible sequence. I remember watching the movie because the mission basically goes according to plan. They planned it so well. There's a couple of tense moments where sentries nearly catch them and things. They break into the camp, which is the scene that's playing in the background now, which has got great music from Roy Budd in it. Don't know if you can hear this. And then they pause when they're cutting the fence, when the dog barks. And everybody's sort of like doing this, thinking, oh, is anyone going to spot us? And then they gradually start moving in. And everybody's like, the men are really well trained. They're all in their little sections, just like they would be. One section covering another and so on. So the mission goes that they get Limbani. Sean Finn, Roger Moore's character's got the rest of the men at the airport. And there's that great scene where he does the whistle and they're all like really close to it. They've all moved up in the grass without being seen. And then they take the airport and the plane. They see the plane, which has come on its way back on a regular flight. And it literally comes down and it lands on, this is spoilers for Adrian here. It lands on the runway. And as it's getting on the runway and it's turning around is when the plane gets the message, pass them by, don't pick them up. And I remember watching that sequence as a kid as the plane took back off again and all the men are going, where's he going? Where's he going? And I turned to my dad and I said, Dad, what's going to happen now? Because I was thinking 2 minutes before that, this movie's really short. They've already rescued the guy. it's been good, but it's all going to be over soon because they're going to be back on the plane. They're going to be home.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking as a kid, oh my God, you know, what's going to happen? What are they going to do? Really, really well done.
Yeah.
And Alan Faulkner goes out.
Every great movie needs that twist, doesn't it?
Got to talk to the men. Men, we will plan our way out of here. And he just issues a load of orders: find transport, find as many weapons and ammunition as you can, strip everything. You know. Now you know they're in the shit. They've got and Ray Fajandas has that scene where he says, "I'm going to put this to you rationally first, and then I'm gonna, you know, I can't remember the exact line, and you're not going to want to do it." And he wants to start a revolution. And he says, then I'm going to put it to you practically. That was it. Then I'm going to put it to you practically. And they talk about whether they go north, south, east, or west. And every direction apart from going towards Lembali's village is going to lead them into disaster. 400 miles of jungle, completely impossible, you know, is one of the directions.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the only scene that the BBFC, the British Board of Film Classification, had actually taken out of this was the crossbow sequence. That was cut because apparently the scene that they actually shot, or the extensions of those scenes that were shot, were actually quite bad. They're actually quite horrific, and they said, you know, just take a couple of seconds out. And I believe that was the only thing that was taken out for the UK release.
No, there was one other thing. Euan Lloyd spoke about it on the anniversary re-release. The scene where they get attacked on the bridge and the truck explodes. There were loads more shots of men on fire burning in the back of the vehicle, and that scene was the most heavily edited before release anywhere. And he said they lost almost half a minute out of that scene.
Wow.
Len Barney's just being rescued on the telly now. If you're hearing machine gun fire in the background, that's why. So that scene was heavily edited. When it was shown on British television, it was either side of the news. Of course, I'd never seen it before. And they had a huge billboard up on the South Bank in London of the poster, massive thing, which ITV paid for because they paid a lot of money for this movie, and the movie was on telly within a year. And they, you know, the other thing that Euan Lloyd did was he sold it to all the holiday camps in the UK.
Wow.
Yeah, because that's where my friend saw it. He saw it at Butlins, in the cinema at Butlins, you know, so he was very financially savvy, was Lloyd, because they had trouble with the distribution in America. That the company that was doing the distribution in America, it went under. So it got a very limited release in America. Did all right in Canada, but because of course America's the big market, Lloyd suddenly stand to make a loss. So he was like, right, we're selling the TV rights immediately. And there was a bidding war between ITV and BBC, and ITV always won because they always had more money. So ITV wanted to make sure lots of people watched it. So they packed it full of adverts. It had about 3 adverts one side of the news, and I think about 2 or 3 advert breaks the other side of the news. But I didn't care. I got to watch it, which was the most important thing. But they even advertised the advertising board. So there was even an advert on telly that said ITV has paid for this billboard on the South Bank for the film you've got to see. And it had a shot of the advertising board on the advert on TV. I was like, nuts. Who does that? I've never seen that before on television, before or since. A TV advert advertising the fact that you've paid for an advert somewhere else.
Very meta.
Of course, it was quite a big deal to buy a big billboard on the South Bank prime advertising space in those days. So, and it paid off because it was hugely watched. Sunday, the 17th of September, 1978. I actually found it in the TV listings.
Wow.
And because it was a Sunday, I had to beg my parents to stay up and watch it. And they were only going to let me watch the first half. So when the news came on, I got sent up to bed. And as soon as I heard the movie come back on, I came racing downstairs and I went, "Mum and Dad, I can't sleep." And then my dad was like, looked at my mum and went, "Okay, like if you're really quiet, you can sit on the sofa, you can watch the rest." And I was like, yeah. The next day, it was all anybody talks about at school was this movie.
Yeah. But it was actually premiered in Soweto, wasn't it? Its world premiere was in Soweto.
Do you know what? I mean, I know it had a premiere in London. I don't know about the.
And when they had the premiere in London,
I know there was protests.
Yeah, there were protests, and what they had was, I believe, Euan Lloyd had a stack of the Soweto News, the newspaper.
They went and handed it out to all the protesters.
That's right, and handed it out to the protesters and said, just take a look at this before you start judging this movie and what we've done. Take a look at this. And of course, all they did was threw them on the ground. Didn't want to know. But of course, the reports in the Soweto News was, this was just a massive movie for, the black population of South Africa, and at least it sort of, it gave an enormous amount of work, as we were saying, because if you knew what it was really like out there at the time, it's very, it really is very difficult to describe, to kind of understand. I mean, the black population were under curfew. I believe it was a 7 o'clock curfew. So by 7 o'clock, all of the black population had to get back to their townships. And if they were found on the street, if they were wandering about, if they were anywhere at night, they'd be arrested and put into prison for breaking the curfew. That's how strict it was. We had, there were all of the buses and public transport, including taxis, were segregated. So you had taxis that were for the black population and the taxis that were for the white population. The same with buses. You had white buses and black buses. Just utterly ridiculous when you think about it. Towns that were segregated. Just utterly ridiculous. But we actually employed quite a few people, and they all lived with us. So there was no chance of anyone being caught on curfew, or outside curfew. And it was kind of quite well known that if there was anybody, if there was anyone that just happened to be in a little bit of difficulty getting back to the townships, that they know they could come to ours and they would stay with us.
Right.
So it was kind of, there were quite a few Brits that would do that. A little bit of a kind of underground safe houses, if you like.
Yeah.
And if any of the Afrikaans neighbours were to report you, what my parents would say is that, these are, these are people that work for us. These are our, our employees. And that's how we all used to sort of get around it and work it. But yeah, there were an awful lot of Brits that would do that. These sort of curfew safe houses.
Well, this is the marquee of the premiere in London at the Leicester Square Theatre. Sadly, not there now. That's now a hotel. It's got a cinema in the basement, but so what? What hotel doesn't have?
Who goes to a basement?
Well, that was the first cinema in Leicester Square I ever went to. I went there to see Legend with Tom Cruise because it just wasn't showing anywhere else, and you had to go into central London to see it. I'm going to see if there's any shots of the Soweto premiere online for the movie.
So I remember all of this fuss at the time where they wanted everybody to sort of boycott going to Africa because of the
that's right,
apartheid upset everyone so much. So like in Australia, for example, the cricket team, if they wanted to tour to play against a team over there would be every year there would be some big fuss about, well, you shouldn't be going over there, and And again, it was the more nuanced sort of argument, as you said about this film, for example, that it's employing people and maybe the movie has some positive message. You know, that there was a lot of people couldn't expand their mind to any nuance. They would just go with the very simplistic sort of
narrative.
Of anything to do with going over there is bad, therefore don't go, and it would just be this sort of hysterical outcry of anger and protests.
Yeah,
and I think that probably to this day it hasn't changed when someone has you know, a problem with something. They don't want to look at nuances. That there's a certain number of people who just want to go with the hysterical outrage. Never consider any nuances at all, you know.
It's funny you say that. It's funny you say that, Adrian. It's funny you say that because they actually experienced a very, very similar kind of thing when they were making Zulu. Very similar. But they were told at the time that they weren't permitted to pay any of the African employees a wage. They weren't supposed to pay them money, so they paid them in cattle. And that was the way they got around it. They were told by the South African government at the time that if you pay these people, we're going to throw you out. You know, you're not going to pay them. You're going to pay us. So they got around it by paying them in livestock. You know.
Well, funnily enough, I spoke to one of the cast of the Wild Geese about a year ago. And I'm just trying to remember his name. I'm just going through the uncredited. It wasn't Rocky Taylor, who, by the way, was there doing stunts. And Bob Simmons was the pilot, by the way, who did all the flying scenes, but was also the pilot of the Hercules that drops them off. The guy that I spoke to was the guy who's in the truck when the truck gets gets stuck on the bridge, and he's like going, it won't start, and you know, Tosh is like having a go at him to fix it quicker, and then suddenly the plane comes down, and he's the one that gets caught in the truck when the truck is burning, and you see him like slump at the wheel, and he was telling me a story that. Basically, he got on Euan Lloyd's bad side for doing something. I can't remember what he said he did, but I think he did or said something, and the next thing he knew, he was being featured on screen, dying in that scene, and he was on his way back to the UK. So that was his last day when he shot that scene where he dies on the bridge. Yeah, so you know, don't upset the producer. If you've got a small part, don't upset the producer is the lesson there. But yeah, he was I just can't remember his name. That's really annoying me now. But yeah, I tracked him down. I wrote to him on I think it was on Facebook and said, "Were you in the Wild Geese?" And he went, "Yes, I was." You know, no one knows that. And I said, "You're the guy that was in the truck." And he said, "Yeah, there's a story behind that." And then I got him on the phone and we had a conversation. And I said, "Oh, listen, I've got to get you on a stream sometime." But he's kind of disappeared. I mean, he's in his 70s now. So whether I'll be able to get him or whether he's even still around, I don't know. But I think he was part of the Bridge Too Far. Quite a few people were on this and on Bridge Too Far because they shot because Greg Powell was stunts on Bridge Too Far, wasn't he? And I think him and Bob Simmons were both on Bridge Too Far. Rocky Taylor was on Bridge Too Far. So I think several of the extras ended up being in both.
So there was that sort of culture of if you rub someone powerful up the wrong way on a film shoot, your character, or a TV show, your character gets killed off quite promptly thereafter. Written out or replaced.
So another thing I mentioned Inside Man before you came on was that a not particularly well-known story is that Euan Lloyd got sponsorship from the manufacturer of the Uzi machine gun. Yeah.
That's that's right.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of the budget he got for that, but he basically got a whole load of blank firing Uzis, you know, but basically said, okay, I'll make them the weapon of choice for the unit, for the mercenaries, so they're going to feature on screen a lot. And at the time, the Israelis had just basically produced them as the kind of close combat weapon of choice.
Yeah, it's a good little weapon.
And that's what I call product placement.
I've fired one. It doesn't half pull up. You've got to really hang on to it. It kicks right up like that. And I took it to a gun range, and you fire along this strip, right? I got one hit in the strip. All the rest of them just went completely wild. So we got the scene at the Stone Bridge, which is coming up on my telly right now. And this is the sequence that was heavily cut. In fact, this still is from this scene. It's Richard Harris and Roger Moore. Roger Moore says not even Jesus could get through that lot when the trucks explode. This is the first scene when people start getting killed. It's a pretty effective sequence. I wanted to show a clip from it, but I'm struggling to find a version of Wild Geese online that's high res enough, because it's going to look proper shit otherwise. Let me see if I can find something that's a bit better. I'll see what I can do here. Yeah, so Inside Man, did you want to say anything about this sequence?
It was a sequence that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah,
same. And I found it. I actually did find it quite shocking when I was a kid watching this.
Yeah.
Oh Jesus, no.
Yeah, because the truck gets stuck on the middle of the bridge, and then the next thing you know, there's a small plane, which these kind of planes were used in Africa. They would equip them with machine guns or light weapons, because they weren't designed to be fighter planes or fighter bombers. That's not why they were manufactured. They'd be owned by private people, and dictators would take them and convert them, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think Idi Amin was one of the most notorious armorers of light aircraft. You know, he would try and convert anything into some kind of war machine. But yeah, you know, sadly, this was the thing that African dictators did at the time, when they didn't have access to, you know, major arms manufacturers and arms sellers. You know, it was very much a cobbled together thing. But yeah, in terms of this sequence, yeah, I really found it quite shocking and quite upsetting as like an 11-year-old kid watching this scene.
Yeah, and I was watching it, and I was even younger than you.
Yeah.
And it was the first time in a movie, any movie, where I had seen a man execute men that were on his own side. And I remember turning to my dad, and I said, "They're wounded. Why is he killing them?" And my dad was like, "Well, they can't take them with them. They got to kill them." And I was like, "Oh my God!" And again, you were sort of, as a kid, you were used to watching fairly simplistic stories where, you know, the good guys kind of won, and that was the film that I thought I was getting when I started watching it.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
then,
you're right. You're absolutely right in what you say, because there's a level of brutality in this that, you know, you just don't expect.
yeah,
You genuinely do not expect it.
no, that's very, very true. Yeah, and boy, is it. And I mean, I would have loved to have seen the original edit for that sequence, because if they're saying they cut a lot of it out, that's a pretty interesting poster. You know, it's you think how gory was it? And that, because when it cuts to the shot, there's two trucks that are burning in the middle of the bridge. You can see the bodies in the back.
Yeah.
And then another 4 guys around the Jeep with Limbani are wounded. There's 2 that are dead and a couple that are still alive, but they're too badly wounded to move. And Whitty kind of does that thing where he sort of nods, kind of nods his head in the negative. It's like it's not going to happen. Yeah, it is a chilling sequence. Chilling sequence.
Yeah, chilling's the correct word. Yeah, definitely chilling. Very chilling.
My God, I'm having to block. Like, I'm literally doing this as we're live. I'm blocking so many people on Twitter. I keep getting like, your comment's been liked by Hot Girl 73. And you click on it and it's just one of those profiles with a link to some dodgy OnlyFans account or whatever. It's like, look, I have no interest in this stuff. Stop trolling me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Has Hot Girl 73 ever watched the Wild Geese?
What? I don't think it's because I'm watching the Wild Geese. No, this happens.
What you said about it doesn't go well for the heroes here is interesting to me because, as you know, Lance, I was recently getting back into Blake 7 and writing my books on it.
Oh yeah, sure.
I showed my son the episodes, and we sort of just watched the sort of half a dozen best ones out of the final season. And I showed him the one where Avon thinks he's going to have to kill Villa to survive. And I was amazed how kind of emotional I found that to watch. I got kind of a little bit choked up at that moment when I thought, I said to myself, he's realizing he's probably going to have to kill his own, even though he denies that he's really fond of Villa. He is kind of his friend, and that moment where he thinks, I'm going to have to kill my own friend if I'm going to survive this situation, So that was 1978. Blake 7 started as well. So, it seems that from the late 60s through to the sort of early 80s, there was a definite shift in the way the good guys were portrayed in film and television, where it got quite dark, and often people started to look at these sort of situations where, maybe things go very badly for the heroes, and maybe they do have to make some quite dark choices, to survive.
But that's interesting, isn't it? Making something, we have so much that's black and white, and good stories are not black and white. You need those that little edge of darkness there, I think. And there seems to be an era where character development actually did mean something. The way we invested in characters that were written, we invested so much time in these characters, whether it just be over the course of a movie, or over 2 or 3 seasons of a TV show. We invested in these characters, and I don't think it was anything to do with, the lack of mass media that we had access to, because I think, we kind of did in terms of video stores as well as just TV. Maybe not to the extent that we have, but it's that kind of level of moral ambiguity. With this, watching somebody killing one of his own men, for the right reasons, it's an awful thing to do, but the reasons were absolutely correct.
Well, there's that line where I think Hardy Kruger says, we can't leave them to the Simbas. And he says, no, we can't. And then Richard Burton says, who gets to do it? And nobody volunteers, and he knows it's his responsibility because he's why they're there. He says, well, I suppose, and then he just says it to himself, I suppose I do. He knows if anybody's going to have to shoot them, it's going to be him. It's his responsibility. There's no ducking out of it. It's a proper powerful moment. I remember being absolutely gobsmacked by that. It was just like, my God, and bearing in mind, I was even younger than you.
Yeah.
When I saw it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it was like, oh my God, you know.
Do you guys know Harlan Ellison's story, I Have No Mouth and I Must
Yes, I
Scream?
do. Yeah, I do know. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a thing where he was talking about how they wanted to make that into a game, you know, and he said, well, this will probably be the first and last game I'm ever involved in the making of, you know. But he had this idea where there's, I think, 5 survivors left of the human race, and this computer is so sadistic it wants to sort of it's sort of like Skynet. It wants to sort of amuse itself by just sort of torturing them, as playthings for as long as possible. So the hero's only victory is to kill them, so that they don't have to go through all this torture, you know.
Yeah.
So I think he was saying in the developing of the game, he said, instead of having there's no good choices, there's only bad choices that aren't as bad as the other bad choices, you know.
Yeah.
So if the outcome is that everyone dies sort of quickly and painlessly as possible, that's better than an outcome where someone's left alive and has to endure years of being tortured and tormented by this awful bloody AI that's captured them, you know.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting to have a scenario where there's no good outcome for the heroes. The most heroic thing that the hero can do is kill the others to spare them from torture.
Yeah.
So that sort of came to mind when you were talking about this idea of, you know, you got to kill these guys to not let them fall into the hands of the sort of the enemy and be, I guess, tortured, interrogated, etc.
And of course, as you know, I suppose this scene was kind of a foreshadowing of what Faulkner was then forced to do towards the end, towards the latter part of the film. You know, which is even more devastating than this. You know, this is pretty bad. But when we see what happens, what he's forced to do, that is requested to do, that is kind of ordered to do, if you like.
Yeah, by his friend, no less.
Yeah. It's that was oh my God, it just it's pretty effective.
By the way, Inside Man, you haven't got like a 4 o'clock call time on set today, have you?
No, nothing at all.
I timed this well then. Fantastic.
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. I'm hoping I'll be able to. I've been working hard to try and get a version of the film I can show some clips from here, but it's and by the way, I've got every version of this film going. I've still got my VHS. I've got 2 different versions on DVD, and I've got the Blu-ray. I don't have the 4K version. I don't know if they've done a 4K version, but I don't believe in 4K, so I won't be getting it. Here's an interesting tidbit that I just found online. Didn't know is that the first Black Action Man doll, who was called Tom Stone, if you remember him,
right?
They brought out like a Black Action Man soldier. They based him on John Canai from the Wild Geese.
Did they?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
So it's actually on the Wikipedia page. So obviously it must be true because Wikipedia is always true. But yeah, it's I was just reading about it. I've overlooked this. So Palitoy based the figure of Tom Stone, part of the Action Man range, on the character Blake after looking at the pre-production photos and posters of the film. Subsequently, some modifications to the figure were made. Kenny made his debut in the film after years of acting on stage with Winston Nashonda. Yeah, that's right. And they continued to make many more films and plays together. They had a really close-knit friendship. John Canny must have been devastated when he died, when Winston Nashonda died, because they had worked together pretty much all their lives. They did God knows how many versions of their plays together at the National. So, yeah. And then that previous photo that I had up showed that's Burton, Harris, and Roger Moore on set with their respective wives and partners at the time. So sitting in front of Harris is the actress Anne Turkle, who was in the film Golden Rendezvous with Harris, if you remember that.
Yeah, Alistair MacLean book, wasn't it?
Alistair MacLean book was made a few years after this.
Yeah, terrible film. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it had the ingredients.
Yeah.
I was a bit surprised by it because it kind of had some good sequences.
Yeah.
But everything seemed to be like so sort of random. It was like the guy who had the job of editing it didn't have a complete movie.
Mm.
And actually, Euan Lloyd, I think, is in that film. I think he's in the engine room. I think he's the geese that goes, "Ready now, mate." When they say we're ready to, how long till you're ready to cast off or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've got the scene on the TV now where Whitty is defending. This was a scene that was cut for ITV. They didn't show him getting chopped up. But this whole action sequence where the Simbas close in on the little group that's got Limbani and they're just crossing the river further down where the water's shallow. Extremely well done. I love it when they do the hand grenade shots and then they cut to a stuntman being propelled in the air and then cut back again. Always thought that editing technique was really effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Whitty's death was another one that really tugged.
Yeah, because by this time you're quite fond of him as a character.
Yeah, he's a
again,
lovely character.
Good a good job on the part of the writing, and of course the actor makes him very endearing.
Yeah,
even though you know that he's gay. Not bearing in mind this is the 70s, and I can't remember when the law was changed that it was. But I don't think the law had
67
that it was no longer illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Even so, it was it wasn't exactly the done thing, was it?
No, I think it was there was this. I mean, if you remember, whenever you heard about rumors of a politician or somebody famous in the newspapers in the British rags. It was like a big scandal. I mean, so what? Big deal. It's but I think this, although he was, as you mentioned, maybe a little camp. However, it didn't stop him from being a hard man.
No, that's right. Yeah, I mean, he goes down fighting and then some. According to statistics, the budget for this was 11.6 million. I dare say 3 or 4 of that went to the leading cast.
Yeah.
And it only made 9.8 million worldwide. That must have been cinema box office, but I bet that's probably why it came on TV so quickly and why Euan Lloyd did all these like television deals and stuff.
Yeah.
So that would have been a knock-on effect of the American distribution being screwed up?
Yeah, the American, I think there's a note about it here with the distribution that in America, the company went under. There's an interview with Lloyd talking about it. It grossed 3 million in the first 10 days of release in the United States and Canada from 550 theaters. The film was only partly distributed in the United States because of the collapse of its American distributor, Allied Artists, and the movie lacked an marketable American star.
Of course, it was going to be Burt Lancaster playing Faulkner, wasn't it? He was, I think, one of the first choices, or one of the first people that was approached.
Yeah, I can't remember if it was. Wasn't Gregory Peck another one?
Yeah, Gregory Peck was another one, and I think there's a funny story about one of the American casting agents, and said, he's got O.J. Simpson up for the role of Sean Finn,
right?
And the Euan Lloyd's like, what are you talking about? He says, well, it says here that Sean Finn is Black Irish.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, ridiculous.
Yeah, they didn't know what that meant.
No.
So, coming into sort of like the final third of the film, this is really when we lose 2 of the main characters. We lose Whitty first, and then we lose Peter Kurtzy, who is the
It's
South
actually
African.
just quickly. They completely mispronounce his name in this, so that's the one bugbear that I have about it. Because
Is it Kotsway or something?
no,
It's pronounced
it's actually Kutsia.
Kutsia.
Kutsia,
Okay.
yeah.
The funny
And
thing
they,
is that Hardy Kruger ended up living in Africa, didn't he?
yeah, he got a farm, I believe. I think he ended up as a farmer
Yeah.
in South Africa. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, he passed away only a couple of years ago, I think.
Yeah. But what a
He
lovely
was
actor.
imported into Australia to act in some early '70s movies, Hardy Kruger, when we needed sort of an overseas actor to give our movies credibility.
His death scene in the film is, I mean, really like again very heroic, but also the kid of me that was watching it was like, oh my god, this guy's died. I couldn't believe it. He was the cool guy with the crossbow, and I was just like, I was absolutely devastated
And
as a kid.
I think it's when Limbani's got hold of his hand and he doesn't want to let him go.
Doesn't want to let him go.
And
Such a powerful moment.
It really is, and I'm not sure which character it is. It's just sir, he's gone, sir. He's gone. And
Jack Sandy says that you can leave him now, Mr. Limbani. He's dead. Yeah.
Is this what's wrong with things at the moment in film and television? That the current crop of writers and producers, a lot of them aren't sort of looking back enough at the tradition of good writing and good storytelling, and that's how you get shows like The Acolyte.
Well, there's an arrogance as well that people think because they've gone on a course at university or they've done this or they've done that, they don't need to do these things.
Yeah, but also I think they're dare I say it, they are of. No, I'm not going to say that they're of a generation, but they are in a crop of people that are really under the impression that they have invented writing, that they've invented modern cinema, and that they've invented modern television.
That there's a modern audience, and that they are the only ones who understand how to cater to it.
And that anything that's gone before is old hat. It's just it's tat. It's nothing more than that. It's just, that's old stuff. So let's not bother with that. Let's make something new. And when they mean new, they mean bad.
Yeah. I saw something recently where it was an actress. I think it might have been, I can't remember who it was. It might have been the lady from Titanic who played Rose. It might have been her. I can't remember. It was one of those sort of actresses from the 90s anyway, who'd been big. And she made a comment that she was shocked when she met the young current crop of actors that they weren't cinephiles. They weren't movie fans or movie buffs. They had no sort of great love of any great classic films. She'd say, "What's your favorite movie?" And they couldn't really answer it. There was nothing from. They had no great loves of the past history of cinema. None of, it wasn't like, was it Bowfinger at the end when the Mexicans are roped into being a crew, and by the end, as soon as their film comes out, the Mexicans are on their phones. They're all talking in Spanish, but in between, but you'd catch them mentioning, Kubrick and Orson Welles and Citizen Kane, and and all the things that people start talking about once they become a real films in their blood kind of cinephile. It was kind of funny in the way it was presented in Bowfinger.
Tragically funny in real life that they don't know these things. You've got a lot of burning bodies in there.
Yeah, this is. I think this was. I think Kit West, who was the special effects supervisor on this.
Yeah,
a lovely man, Kit West. Sadly,
yeah, he worked on Lynch's Dune.
Yeah, he also Raise the Lost Ark, I think, was another one of Kit's.
And I remember reading an interview with him, and he basically said, everybody's always asking me to produce more smoke, and if you want smoke, you've got to have tires, because tires burn really well and produce lots of smoke. You can't do that on a set now.
Yeah.
I think for environmental, special effects by Kit West and Nick Alder.
Nicky Alder. Oh, Nicky Alder.
Nicky Alder's still alive.
Nicky Alder, he built the
Space
Nostromo.
1999.
Yeah, that's
Mate,
right.
Can you Inside Man? Can you get hold of him?
I can get hold of Nicky Alder. Yeah,
let's get him on.
Yeah, I'll get Nicky Alder. He's because he created the Nostromo among many other miniature effects for Alien. And obviously Space 1999 with Brian Johnson. I think I'm not sure whether Brian Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He told me that on Facebook. I got told off by Nick Alder because I sort of misquoted a comment from Martin Bower, the model.
Martin Bower.
Model maker. I've spoken to Martin.
Yeah, Martin's also he also did Alien as well. I think he actually was partly responsible for designing the Nostromo. Sorry, Adrian, please go ahead. Sorry, man.
I can see you've got direct contact with him.
Nick Alder was sort of a hero to me, and I sort of accidentally upset him, and he gave me a bit of a telling off.
Well, we won't have you on that stream then, Adrian. when we get him on,
he told me that he was the only one who could handle the pyrotechnics effects, and that Martin Bower never had anything to do with that sort of stuff. He stayed right away from it,
Right.
I think the actual quote I was thinking of from Martin Bower was he was talking about the dirtying down process of models to make them look more real. That was kind of what he's been doing.
Yeah.
And some detailing,
But that trimmed it by a few seconds. There's a scene that follows shortly after this, right, which I've always wondered about. And it's the scene when you see, I don't know if you know the scene I mean. It's the scene when you see Ndofa briefing his men, and he's describing the attack and how he's going to put, he's going to send one group of men into the village to wait, and the other group of men are going to come from a different direction, and that entire sequence is all done in a foreign language. And I've always wanted to. It's not subtitles, and I'm like, why would you cut? That's the one thing that's always bugged me. I'm trying to find it now. Why would you cut to this scene where you're showing the sort of the enemy commander? It's the only time we see him. We've heard about him quite a few times. Here we go. I found it. Here it is. And we've heard about him. This is the only time we see him. This dictator of this country, who incidentally looks like he's stepped off a Bollywood movie musical. But I also want to know what he's saying. I don't know why they didn't subtitle that scene. Funny, isn't it?
Is it meant to be taken just sort of visually?
Well, he is talking. You can hear him, and he's pointing on the ground, and you can obviously say they're planning on attacking they know roughly where the mercenaries are. They're going to attack them from two directions.
Yeah. What's weird is that I believe the language is actually one of the South African languages, which is Sotho.
Right.
I believe it's a combination of Sotho, and there is some Afrikaans in there as well.
Right.
There's a couple of parts where he says, basically in Afrikaans, he says, and we do this like this and like this, and those are the only bits that are in Afrikaans. But the rest of it, I believe it's actually Sotho. Because there are multiple languages spoken in South Africa.
So coming up to the final battle sequence, the lay of the land is basically this: a small unit led by Sean Finn with 4 other men has gone ahead to check on this plane to see if the plane is flyable, if he can fly it, because it's already been established he can fly any aircraft you care to name. That's one of the lines in the film. And then as they approach the village, which is near the airfield, they know that the Simbas are lying in wait for ambush. So Faulkner, being the clever tactician that he is, he sets up a screen of fire and he says, I'll go round and take him in the side. So Sandy, who sets up the screen of fire, opens fire. Remember when the Expendables was being made, and I sort of read the plot description and I thought, oh, this is basically the Wild Geese, except instead of Burton, Harris, and all the rest of it, we've got Schwarzenegger, Stallone, and
Statham.
What's his name, Bruce Willis, and
all those people.
Yeah, and I thought this could be really good.
Turning up as a baddie in one of them.
And I watched the first film, and about 60 minutes into it, I realised they're not going to kill any of the actors. This is bullshit. And of course, the reason that they weren't going to kill any of them was because they were already thinking about the next film that they were going to make.
Yeah, it's basically a paycheck, isn't it? That sort of.
That's right. One of the soldiers. There's Cubans and there's a East German advisor, and so there's supposed to be. I think that general guy is technically supposed to be a Cuban. So he's not necessarily General Lindofer, but I mean, he's the only one. He's
with Sandy. We kind of, I mean, much like Alan Faulkner. He's protective of him. He feels duty bound to look after him.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we feel his loss really quite keenly.
Yeah.
I noticed something about that in. Do you remember the modern Doctor Who one with David Tennant, The Girl in the Fireplace?
Yes.
Yeah, it was the whole thing. The Doctor sort of went to this enormous length to save her life from like killer robots or something, and he sort of gets right to the end of, I've saved you, isn't that fantastic? Come with me, let's go see the stars. She's dead. Oh. And it was that gut punch, that's what was, and it made me realize something about storytelling. It was kind of, I thought, yeah, that's kind of like that happened in the Spider-Man comics with Gwen Stacy. He catches her with a web. I've saved you. No, it broke her neck. Oh, it's that. You're sort of invested in the whole thing that the hero is going through. I'm going to save the day. I'm going to rescue this person from certain death. And just as you think everything's fine, no, it gets ripped away. And that has a real emotional impact, which a lot of other stories fail to.
I have the. I'm just going to enlarge myself. Here it is. So this is the vinyl. Now, it took me ages to get this right, because by the time I sort of wanted the vinyl, which was probably around 79, I couldn't find it anywhere, and people said they'd seen it. It wasn't until I went up to London to 58 Dean Street Records, which I still have a bag for up there. I found it and I decided to keep it. It was a shop owned by these two brothers, and all it sold was soundtracks. That was all. And they imported loads from America, and they always had rare ones. So I got this for about 20 quid it was. Yeah. And there you go. I've also got it on CD, which I bought later. Yeah. But it's got that old vinyl smell still, because I've got the it might be mothballs, I don't know. Because I've got it in this, had it in this thing for so long. But yeah, man, that, funny enough, by the way, I've also got this. But no one cares about that because the film's rubbish. But I do. I mean, the soundtrack to it was all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The story was a story for Wild Geese 2. Was a shit story from the get-go, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just wasn't very good, was it?
It's a shame, isn't it? And it kind of becomes slightly more American as well, I think.
Yeah.
Too much trying to appeal to a market that it wasn't really meant for.
Yeah. So Burton's PA is the guy that's holding Limbani in this shot.
Right.
Yeah. And yeah. And this is when they need proof that he's on board, because if they don't get it, they're going to get shot down, basically.
I said they're arriving in Salisbury, aren't they? Rhodesia, as it was.
Yeah.
There.
Did you ever go to Rhodesia when you were
Yes,
living
I did.
over there?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, as it was Rhodesia. It was amazing. It was
Zambia now.
Zimbabwe now.
Zimbabwe, sorry.
Yeah, so we crossed the. You have to go. You cross the Limpopo over the border is called Bait Bridge. So you go across Bait Bridge and went to Bulawayo, Victoria Falls. Stayed in Victoria Falls for quite some time actually. And we actually went on a holiday there, and we travelled around a lot of the a lot of the kind of safari parks and everything, and we went camping there. So we had this big sort of caravan camper thing, and my dad was a keen card player, and we went to the Victoria Falls Casino Hotel, and he won a stack of money. And he won so much money that we actually stayed there for another 2 weeks, just traveling around Rhodesia. And it was at the Victoria Falls Casino Hotel. They had an outdoor cinema, and that was where I saw Paper Tiger for the first time.
Oh yeah, that's another favourite film of mine.
Yeah.
We actually, by the way, our stream actually got interrupted because I showed too much of the movie at one point.
Oh.
We briefly got taken off. We're live now, but we got taken off for a little bit.
Oops.
Yeah, well, that happens when you show too much. Unfortunately, I would have thought it's ridiculous. The film is so old. It's and I mean this stream was going to be a watch party originally, but the reason I didn't do it as a watch party was because I thought, we'll probably get in trouble if we show too much of the movie. I can see there's a big section where it says video unavailable. So I won't stream too much more of the film itself. That's why we suddenly lost all our viewers. I wonder where everybody had gone. Anyway, so to finish off, eventually there's 11 men that get out. Well, 12 including Faulkner, and they managed to land in Salisbury just about. And that, by the way, is the same runway that they used at the beginning of the movie. It's just redressed. So Faulkner goes and confronts Matheson, who is the banker who hired him in the first place. And this is a great scene. I really love this scene because he's got that great line where he says, I had a big speech prepared for you. It was really eloquent, as a matter of fact. It went into the philosophy between the relationship between the mercenary and his employer. But standing here right now, thinking about all those dead bodies littered across Africa, I don't think I can be bothered to go through all of that. And, the guy says, well, I suppose you better kill me. And he says, yeah, you're a remarkable man, Sir Edward. I suppose I better had. And just fucking shoots him.
And it's that shot, that when he shoots him, I think Stuart Granger's reaction is pure shock. He really
he didn't think he's going to die. It does. I remember the commentary from Euan Lloyd when he actually dies. He does say, because I think Roger Moore's on the commentary as well, and they both kind of say, he does that thing where he goes, and he sort of takes quite a long time to die. And Euan Lloyd says, yeah, we probably could have done that a bit better. And and of course he was a huge star, Stuart Granger, back in the day.
Whose real name was James Stewart.
That's right, but he had to change it because of Jimmy Stewart, didn't he?
Yeah, but a lovely actor. What a lovely actor he was. Really lovely actor.
And ultimately he kills him, goes out to the car, and Roger Moore says to him, "Do I have to ask how it went?" No. Good. I thought not. And then the film finishes with him going to see Emil, Rayford Jander's son, and that's the end of the movie, basically.
And then Richard Burton went and did War of the Worlds.
Oh yes, but I think that was recorded before this. I think that was recorded in '73, wasn't it?
Oh, I thought it was later than that.
I thought it was late
around about the same time, about 78.
Was it? Let me look at Jeff Wayne. That's the thing that I had a meeting in London in 1997 with a very well-known theatre producer. They are still alive, so I'm not going to say their name. And I said, I've got this great idea for a show, because my dad got me the meeting because my dad's boss used to be married to this woman. So they had all met before, dinner parties, all that kind of thing. And I said to my dad, get me a meeting with her. And my mum was all like worried. She said, well, she's only going to be interested if it's a project that's going to make her money. And I said, this what I'm going to propose to her will make her a shitload of money. And I said to her, you should, that was recorded in '77. So it was around this time. You're right. I said to her, you should put War of the Worlds on stage. And I told her how to do it with big screens and all of this kind. And she went, nobody will pay to go and see that.
Oh, that's toured all over the world now.
Yeah, I know. It's one of the biggest selling international shows of all time.
Oh,
nobody will pay to go and see that, she said.
You were ahead of the curve.
I was way ahead of it.
In 1982, I wrote a parody of Star Wars, before Spaceballs or any of that sort of stuff, and I tried to interest people in publishing it as a satirical novel that was going to parody the sci-fi genre. And I had publishers here in Australia saying, "What's the point of this?" And I said, "It's funny, And, no, I can't see anybody's going to be interested in that sort of thing, parodying Star Wars. No, it's not going to. No one will be on, but watch that, or read that. Yeah. It's possible to be ahead of the game a little bit, unfortunately.
Well, some years ago, I had I put together a synopsis and treatment for a 6-part mini-series. Wrote, I think, about 3/4 of the first script, so I put it all together and I actually had a title for it. I thought, right, okay, I'll send this off. I'll give it to my agent, see what they think, see if there's anything that they can do with it. And it was a 6-part mini-series, 40 minutes per episode, and it was about the 6 days of the Iranian embassy siege.
Oh,
and
right.
It was actually called 6 Days. And of course, I gave it to my agent, and my agent said, well, not sure if this is the right time for it, so I don't know who I'm actually going to be sending this out to.
When was that?
This was about 15 years ago.
Right. So this is after Who Dares Wins had been made.
Well after.
Yeah.
And I had all of my research, all of the research material. I've still got these great big box folders just full of all the research material and photographs and all kinds of stuff.
The biggest one for me was in the late 80s. I had this idea for a show where there'd be a guy and a girl who both worked for the government as investigators, and they would investigate UFOs and other strange cases. And I got told by the head of Film Victoria here in Australia that no one's going to watch secret agents and UFO investigations in the 1990s. This was literally 18 months before the X-Files came out and became the biggest show on television.
Well, yeah. So you Inside Man, yours was 15 years ago. 6 Days came out. What year was that? It was about 6 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was about 2018. I think. And I was, and of course, my agent never did anything with it, and I've still got all the stuff. I've still got the scripts and everything.
2017, it went into production in 2016.
Yeah.
And half of it was shot in, I think, New Zealand or somewhere.
That's
really
right.
bizarre.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, New
You
Zealand.
could make that now. That would work now if it was done as a, looking back at that point in history from today's perspective, because I mean it's not as if Iran isn't back in the news,
I don't think anybody would get, because that film's been made and it's not that old. I don't think it would get funding. That's the problem.
Yeah, and of course because it's based on Rusty Furman's book, who was one of the SAS guys that was actually part of the siege. So that's Rusty Furman's book. The film's called 6 Days, which that sort of pissed me off a little bit, because I thought, oh yeah, I wonder if this is my agent actually did send it somewhere, and of course they obviously didn't. It's pure coincidence. It's pure coincidence. I mean, 6 Days isn't.
That just happens, unfortunately.
It's not exactly the most original title. I mean, that was a working title anyway, but 6 Days not an original title. But it's just one of those coincidence things, isn't it, really?
Well, okay, it's 1:30, way past sensible hour. It must be a horrendous time for Adrian. Oh no, actually, you'll be your morning now, won't it?
Yeah, I actually just got home from dropping my son off at school and my wife off at work. And I was going to go back to bed and have a nap, and then I just thought
instead I made you get up
going on with Outcast Creative, because I've been neglecting my my modding, and here I am.
No, that's all right. I don't expect people to mod for me at any time other than when they're available. Well, look, it's been great talking about this film, because it is one of my faves.
I definitely agree with your take on Roger Moore too. I think he was a much more versatile actor than he often gave himself credit for, or that many critics gave him credit for.
No, that's
obviously they rejigged Bond to be a vehicle for him in the end, which was successful for a lot of years.
Yeah, I think Bond Moore was very aware of his limitations, but he probably imposed more limitations on himself than was necessary, is my kind of... So he was capable of more than he thought, and I think probably higher regarded more than he thought he was tolerated, because he always just thought it was just purely, he just got by on his good looks, basically, and thought he was a very average actor, which I think is unfair. But
he must have done something right, because I remember when he passed away, I was really upset. And I'd only met him the year before at a book signing. I was devastated, absolutely devastated. But we're going to end it there. Such a sweet guy too.
It's late. What's that?
He seemed like such a sweet guy, Roger Moore.
No, he was all right. When I met him, he was all right. He was a bit harried, but because he was a big queue of people and you couldn't really stop and talk to him. But I did get to tell him something very briefly, and his wife Kiki looked up and gave me a massive smile, and I've mentioned him in my new book, and her, funnily enough. All right, so we're going to be back on Sunday talking about The Shield again. Episodes, is it 8 and 9?
It's 8 and 9, yeah.
Episodes 8 and 9 this Sunday. We're going to be talking about those, digesting that in great detail. I've got a couple more actors booked, one of whom is coming on this month, and he is the leading actor in both of these two films, Jeffrey Byron.
In a future that grows ever closer, the fate of our Earth will lie in the hands of one man, a solitary warrior of great courage. His name is Dogen, and he is called the Finder.
He is a warrior in a wasteland without mercy.
It's the little guy.
He has survived where countless others have died.
Good shot, huh?
He has destroyed all that would kill him.
We're out of control.